But in this chapter, the Alter Rebbe explains us what is the inner meaning, why Talmud Torah Keneged Kol, why is Torah greater than other mitzvahs, and he says this is because Torah, because the union, and again the explanation which we had till now, the first part of chapter 5, was the union which exists, the Yid with Hashem, the Neshama with Hashem, via the Torah, is so much greater than the union which exists with the neshama via doing a mitzvah. And in brief, we learned that when a person does a mitzvah, the godly energy encompasses, surrounds the Jew, surrounds the neshama. When a person learns Torah, additional to the godly energy surrounding the neshama is surrounding the godly energy. In other words, the union works both ways. And Alter Rebbe, again, the Alter Rebbe elaborated on this, the first part of the chapter, which is up till what we're holding today, that it doesn't exist a union physically that something should be surrounding and surrounded by the same thing at the same time. Or you're surrounding, or you're surrounded by. And to the exclusion of Torah, that when a Yid learns Torah, additional that the Torah surrounds his mind, his seichel, his intellect, which again, that's the way a person learns Torah, with his intellect. The Torah is invested in the intellect of the person. So the union it's a dual union, and a dual union with what? With the essence of God, which is placed in Torah, as opposed to mitzvahs. Mitzvahs, again, the godly energy encompasses the person, so it's a one-way union. That was basically the point we learned till this part, and then we go on. This is the great advantage and the great wondrous virtue. And Le'en Kates means infinite. Learning Torah is infinitely greater than doing a mitzvah. So Le'en Kates means infinite. It's Alter Rebbe, when he writes, so we know how the Alter Rebbe was very precise in every, not only word, in every letter he wrote. So when you say infinite is we can't even understand in our finite minds, which we're part of the finitude of reality. We can't even understand the concept of infinity, right? But when the Alter Rebbe writes Le'en Kates, it means literally infinitely. To learning Torah is infinitely greater than doing a mitzvah. Asher, which exists in the mitzvah of learning Torah, knowing Torah, and perceiving Torah. Al kol ha-mitzvahs ma'asis, even greater than all the other actual mitzvahs. Afil mitzvah tluis b'dibur, even the mitzvahs which are associated with speech. And what means even? Because we know the advantage of man over other creation, that he is gifted with the gift of speech. No one else could speak, only the medaber, the man. So, and not only that, Hashem, part of the mitzvahs of Hashem are incorporated with speech. In other words, we say a bracha, we daven. So these are more mitzvahs which are on a kind of more refined or upgraded level, more than the mitzvahs which we do with our action. Because action is something which is not unique to man, yet most of the mitzvahs are associated with our action, because Hashem wanted us to transform our actions and make our actions holy. But if you look at the mitzvahs on its own, mitzvahs associated with speech are a little more refined. It's a person davens as opposed to just shaking a lulav and esrog. And I say just not because of the true virtue of the mitzvah, because shaking lulav and esrog is a deraisa, is a Torah command. And the even prayer is also Torah command, but the style of prayer, the 3 times a day, and the establishment, the constitution of prayer, the way we have it in the Siddur, is not so much. That part is not the Raisa, that's a Rabbanon. But if you think about it on a level, if you think about the level of speech over action, speech is unique because it's a unique gift, which is gifted to the human race, in other words, to mankind. So when a person does a mitzvah with speech, it seems to be something so special by virtue of what it's all about. He's davening, he's learning Torah, he's using his gift of speech in his service to Hashem. So one would say that davening or saying a bracha is because it's not only a mitzvah, but it's a mitzvah which is associated with the special gift of dibur, of speech. Maybe that is even more special than understanding a part of Torah. So the Alter Rebbe says no. Learning Torah, the knowledge of Torah, perceiving Torah is greater and infinitely greater of all the mitzvahs ma'asiyos, not only which is again shaking lulav and esrog and lighting a Shabbos candle and and putting on tefillin. But he says even something which is an expression of our more refined expressions, which are dibur, which is our speech, mitzvahs associated with the speech. Knowing Torah is even greater than that. And here the Alter Rebbe added, if you remember, we emphasized this last few words, afilu mitzvahs Talmud Torah shebedibur, even the mitzvah of learning Torah associated with speech. We're not going to elaborate on this point right now, but I'll say it brief just to recap what Alter Rebbe is saying over here. How could you say knowing Torah is greater than the mitzvah of Talmud Torah? If you want to read it in the English, it says even over the mitzvah of oral Torah study. What does it mean, even over the mitzvah of oral Torah study? You're talking about the mitzvah of learning Torah. How could that be greater than the mitzvah of oral Torah study? The answer is, or the simple meaning of what the Rebbe is saying over here, that in the mitzvah of learning Torah, there's two dimensions. Again, to recap, which we learned already, but the one dimension is the understanding of what you're learning, the understanding of the content of what you're the information what you're learning, and we've mentioned a few times. Without that, it's not called limud Torah. Limud Torah, learning Torah, is understanding what you're learning. Someone opens a Tanya or a Chumash to fulfill the mitzvah of learning Torah. You have to understand what you're saying. It's not Tehillim. The only exception that David HaMelech asked and beseeched Hashem that a Jew could take a Tehillim and read the Tehillim without understanding what he exactly is saying, even though it's always good to understand. You see people put emphasis in translating the Tehillim and it's a different gishmak, and it's a different type of saying when you say Tehillim, when you understand what you're saying. But you think about but if you think of truly the fulfillment of reading Tehillim. In other words, the idea of Tehillim is, to the exclusion of all of Torah, is established in a way that you could read Tehillim and you're accomplishing everything you need to accomplish by reading Tehillim. It says David HaMelech asked and begged Hashem, please, all of Klal Yisrael should be able to read the Tehillim even without knowing what they're exactly saying, and it should have the same impact. So, but that's the exclusion of Tehillim. Other than that, someone opens up Tanya and he says, I want to learn Tanya today. He's going to read a page of Tanya without understanding what he's saying. And we go first to Tanya, to Mishnayos, to Chumash. Chumash is also an exception. There's an exception to Chumash, which we see it evidently when a person gets an aliyah, he's called up to the Torah, and he makes a bracha, and he doesn't necessarily know what he's saying. Right? Many people, they don't exactly. How could you make a bracha? You don't make a bracha in vain. It's not just a blessing has Hashem's name. So it says the Torah Shebiksav, again, to the exclusion of the written Torah, the Tehillim. Why does the Gemara deal with David HaMelech's beseech to Hashem regarding Tehillim, even though we find in the oral Torah, because Tehillim is not part of Chamisha Chumash Torah. It's not part of the 5 books of Torah's Moshe. So there, in other words, the other 24 parts of Tanakh, Nevi'im, Miksuvim, Tehillim is the only sefer which, even by reading it, you accomplish what you need to accomplish. But when it comes to Chumash, you have that exception as well. But anything else in the Chumash, Rashi, Mishnayos, a Medrash, you want to fulfill the mitzvah of learning Torah, you ought to understand what you're saying. That knowledge, that understanding, in other words, that's one dimension of learning Torah. That is the original, that is what the mitzvah of learning Torah is all about, to understand and to thoroughly understand what you're reading. Then there's another dimension of the mitzvah of learning Torah. The Gemara says that the real idea, or rather one wants to fulfill the mitzvah of learning Torah, he has to verbalize the words what he's saying. And we mentioned as well, if you remember, you find that you go into a Beis HaMedrash, into a kollel, you see people are sitting and studying, not only in a way that they're understanding what they're saying, what they're studying, but you see that they say the words out loud. You go to shul, you see people learning Gemara or Mishnayos or anything they're learning and saying aloud, well, what's this all about? Why do you have to say that? You mention in contrast to any other study, you go into a library, people are very much involved in the studies which they're involved with, and you don't see that they verbally utter the words of the book they're reading. The answer is because learning Torah, there's a mitzvah to verbalize the words to what you're saying. That's why someone takes a Chumash, it says, Vayemer Hashem al Moshe, and Hashem said to Moshe. And you see in the cheters, in the girls' schools, they say it together, the kids loud, but because here it's not only to know what the meaning is all about, but there's a mitzvah to say it, to say the words what you're learning. So you see these two dimensions which exist in learning Torah. There's the mitzvah of knowing what you're learning, which knowing is not associated with speech. And then there's the mitzvah of the other dimension of learning Torah is to verbalize the words of the Torah. So here the Alter Rebbe is saying that the knowledge of Torah is greater than the mitzvah of verbalizing the words of Torah. It's the same Torah, but the first dimension, the dimension which deals with the knowledge, the perception of what you're learning, is way greater. And how much greater? Infinitely greater. Not only the other mitzvah, not any other mitzvah which is associated with speech, which is not associated with Torah, like praying or saying a bracha, etc. But even that dimension which exists within Torah itself, which is the dimension of verbally uttering the words of Torah, which exist in the midst of learning Torah, the knowledge dimension is infinitely greater than the words of the Torah which one verbalizes when he learns the Torah. So this is afila mitzvah Talmud Torah shebedibur. And why so? Again, back to what the explanation which the Alter Rebbe said in the beginning of the chapter, through all the other mitzvahs which are associated with speech, all ma'aseh associated with action. HaKadosh Baruch Hu malbish sanefesh. You have the godly energy which encompasses the soul, and surrounds the soul from head to foot. Like I had to tell you, say, completely encompasses the neshama. It's supposed to be the asatayra, when a person is opposed to the knowledge of Torah, in contrast to the knowledge of Torah, additional to the fact that the knowledge of Hashem is in the seichel, the person's intellect is invested in Chochmas Hashem, in the wisdom, godly wisdom, this is the common denominator which exists with all mitzvahs. Additional to this, also the Chochmas Hashem, good evening, also the Chochmas Hashem is Bikir Bay, is within him. In other words, he's kind of sandwiched from both angles. So he is the godly wisdom which exists in Torah is surrounding his intellect, and his intellect is surrounding the godly energy. So, and again, as we mentioned, it's not only he's sandwiched from both sides, dealing with that unique union which comes from both sides as opposed to mitzvahs, but also the idea that Torah enters into his seichel. Torah becomes pnimius, which means it enters in a way that it becomes part and parcel of the person. And that's why, as he's going to say over here, that's why Torah is compared to bread. Let's just see where we're holding over here. Trying to just find here I have it. No, I'm good. So Masha Seichel, right? Chochmas Hashem Bikir Bay, that the wisdom of Hashem enters into him. That doesn't exist by doing mitzvahs. Because by doing mitzvahs, the godly energy which exists within the mitzvah surrounds the neshama, but it doesn't enter into the neshama. By learning Torah, you have both. The godly energy surrounds the neshama, and it enters into the seichel, into the intellect which is perceiving the Torah. Masha seichel masig b'teifis u'masig b'sichli, which the intellect grasps and perceives and surrounds, encompasses with his seichel. Masha efshel elitva, with his intellect. Masha efshel elitves, which he has anything which he has the ability, in other words, at his level, to perceive ulahasig and to understand midias haTorah. Ish kifi sichloi, from the knowledge of Torah, each one kifi sichloi, according to his knowledge, v'koyach diyasei, and the energy of his, how much he is able, it was attainable to him to know, v'hasagasi b'pardes, how much he could perceive. B'pardes, we spoke about it in the beginning of the 4th chapter. Pardes literally means pardes is an orchard, but Torah, there's 4 different levels of learning Torah. There's Pei stands for Pshat, Reish for Remez, Dalet for Drush, and Samach for Sod. There's a simple meaning. There is the hints of Torah. There's the Drush, like you find the Medrash. You find what the Medrash says about the Parsha. Would not necessarily, is it always aligned with the simple meaning of the Parsha. We're not going to go elaborate all how each one fits, in other words, coincide all these 4 levels, but there are definitely 4 levels in learning Torah. There's the simple meaning, There's the hint, Zerush is the medrash, and Samach is the Seid, the secrets of Torah, which is all one Torah, just like you find by person. There's a combination of the vital organs, and everything is important. A complete person needs every part of himself or herself in order to function normally, but there's different levels within the person. There's his heart, and then there's his nerve system, which each one is a deeper level within the person, and then on the other hand, the nerve system or the heart doesn't fulfill what the actual foot fulfills, right? The foot brings a person to point A to point B. The head, with all its virtues, doesn't bring a person from point A to point B. So you need the feet. And the feet, on the contrary, the feet is what grounds the person. Then you have the soul, and you have within the soul different levels. So to the Torah, also there are different levels of the Torah. Ultimately, they all have to coincide with each other. They can't really contradict with each other because it's all one part of Torah, but they are indeed different levels. There's a simple meaning that Avraham Avinu, for example, when you open a Chumash, it happened at a certain time, at a certain place, that Avraham Avinu went from this place, and he went to that place, and the story with Sarah, it all happened on this pshat level. Then there is the hints, and then there's the secrets, and then there's the medrash. So, the Rebbe says over here in brief that when a person learns anything, any part of Torah which is attainable to him, in all these four levels of Pshat, Remesh, Drush, Sod. So when he learns that, so again, additional to the energy which exists in the Torah, which, as we mentioned, what is the energy which exists in the Torah? Is the essence of God which exists in the Torah, encompasses the person. More so, it goes within the nefesh, within the soul, within the intellect, which precedes this Torah. Now the Rebbe goes on, because with the knowledge of Torah, the Torah is invested in this soul of man, the sichlei in his intellect, the Torah is surrounded by the intellect, by the soul of the man who learns Torah. Therefore, Torah, not mitzvahs. Torah is called bread. Torah is called sustenance of the nefesh, sustenance of the soul. Why? Just like bread sustains the body only when you internalize the bread into the intestines of the person, and then only then it transforms and becomes blood and flesh, and part of his flesh, of the person eating bread. As we mentioned, we gave an example. Someone's going to jump into a pantry full of hundreds of loaves of bread, and he's going to sit. The bread is going to surround him from head to toe. And if he's hungry, he will not become even one bit less hungry because he's surrounded by the bread. The bread should have an impact on you, and it should break your hunger and ultimately become part of you. You have to internalize it. And it's not just mechanically internalizing it. It really dissolves within the person. And that piece of bread was on the table before, now becomes his blood. It becomes his flesh and becomes part and parcel of him. Only then will he live and he will continue to exist. That is the similarity of Torah to bread. When a person learns Torah vasagos and precedes Torah, the nefesh ha'adam shalem dehetiv be'iyun sichle, in the soul of man, which learns it thoroughly with the depth of his intellect, till it becomes one. In other words, it's perceived with his intellect, it becomes one with him, and it ultimately unites with him. Only then it becomes sustenance to the soul, and life within the soul. And what kind of life? A life associated with God. It is a godly life. This is godly energy. Michaya Chaim, from the source of life, Ein Sof Baruch Hu, the infinity of Hashem, blessed be He, Hamalubish v'chachmasa v'terasi, Sher b'kirba, which is invested in this wisdom and in this Torah, which exists with the Jew, which just absorbed the Torah. And absorb in this context means he understood. He understood thoroughly what he's learning. At that moment, the whole energy which exists within the Torah, which is a godly energy, exists within the Torah. If you remember the first chapter, the Alter Rebbe writes, when you open up a Mishnah, and the Mishnah speaks about a certain case, and this one had an argument with this one, and this one had, and the Torah's dictate is, the verdict of Torah is so and so. It could be it would never happen. From the beginning of time to the end of time, it will never happen. It never did happen. It never will happen. But because this becomes part of Torah, God placed himself, God's essence is in that case because it's part of the Mishnah or the Gemara or any part of Torah. When you learn it, so there's a godly energy which exists in the study which you're learning. So when you learn it, and again, bread, you got to chew it, you got to swallow it in a healthy fashion. So too, The Rebbe is saying this. If you see, he alludes to what we said before, that someone opens up any book of Torah and said, God, this is part of you, and I believe you, and you're probably saying the right thing over here, and he's going to close the book. He didn't fulfill the mitzvah. Even though he completely submitted himself to the word of God, he didn't. It's like somebody taking the bread or just placing it all around him, or not eating it in a healthy manner, not chewing it even. It could even be dangerous, or it doesn't have the appropriate effect. And therefore it won't have the appropriate effect which bread has to have on the person. So too, learning Torah says, learn the hated. He learns it thoroughly, with the profundity of his intellect, which means he learns it profoundly. He understands. There's no such a thing when a person opens up a Shulchan Aruch or any subject, a Medrash. Yeah, probably talking about Moshe Rabbeinu and Kairach and that story. Well, if you want to learn Torah, you have to understand what every word means and every line means, and anything you learn, any subject the person learns, he has to understand. It's like eating bread. It has to be eaten in an appropriate manner, and it has to dissolve, and it has to be absorbed in a healthy fashion, and then it becomes part of his blood and his flesh and so on, and it makes him a healthy person. Similarly to Torah, in order to have the impact of Torah, that Torah should not only, the energy of Torah not only as in common denominator with all the other mitzvahs, that the energy should surround the seichel, but it should go into the seichel, become chayis, life. What kind of life? Life associated with God. Ein Sof Baruch Hu, the infinite light of God which exists in the Torah. You have to understand it thoroughly, but when you do, this is again additional to the mitzvah of Linei Torah, that the godly energy surrounds the soul. It enters within. It becomes part and parcel of the Jewish neshama, that the Torah again not only encompassed by, which is again exists with all the other mitzvahs, but it enters into the neshama. We mentioned before, not only the neshama, that unique phenomenon of the neshama being sandwiched between the godly energy which exists in the Torah, but more so there's something special that it enters within. It becomes part of the neshama, part of the energy of the neshama. It dissolves within the neshama. And that's why David HaMelech says, he continues, this is what the pasuk says, David HaMelech says, that your Torah is within my intestines. Why did David HaMelech say such an expression? Because David HaMelech was alluding to this virtue which exists with Torah, which does not exist with mitzvahs. Because by mitzvahs, as we said, because it just encompasses the neshama, it does not beseich meya. You cannot say it enters within. It's encompassed by. When it comes to Torah, it says b'seich meya, it enters within. It says the Eitz Chaim, which was again the favorite Talmud of the Arizal, which by the way tonight's the Arizal's yard site, just to point this out. Shar Mem Dalet Peri Gimel, he wrote his famous Sefer Eitz Chaim. He divided into portals, the 44th portal, the 3rd chapter. So he writes there that Levushi and Neshamas Began Eden, Heima Mitzvahs. That he writes this interestingly. He says, just like a person, she needs to live normally in this realm, in this world. A person needs basically 2 things. He needs food to eat, to live, and he needs garments. Right? The person needs garments in order to function, or to present themselves to the outside, etc. To be successful in this world, is to get out there. He has to, or also to stay warm, right? And based on the season, we change our style of garments, the warmth, the thickness of our garments. Garments are a vital reality in our world, in this realm. Obviously, there's another component, which is a person needs a house. You have to have a roof overhead. But here he's dealing with these 2 components, which a person needs as a necessity in this world. So that Eitz Chaim says something very interesting. And the Gan Eden is also a world. And in Gan Eden, you also need these 2 components. You need garments and you need sustenance. So the Eitz Chaim says, what are the garments? Obviously, it's not the physical garments, because it's not a physical world. It's certainly not cake and coffee or a sandwich, because it's not a physical world up there. It's Gan Eden. So what is the sustenance? The Arizal writes that the mitzvahs, what a person does in this world, that eventually becomes his levushim, his garments in the world to come, in order to him to appreciate. In this world, we need the garments simply in order to interact, to appreciate the reality of this world. You need to be dressed. Yeah, the person needs the garments. Again, if it's associated with with weather, you need the garments in order to live normally, in order to be in the environment of this world. Also in the context of one's socially and how he gets out there. A person, as I mentioned a few times, this is the makeup, this is the constitution of the human convention dictates that a person dresses. Garments are a crucial component of a person's living in this world. It's not only, okay, I have enough what to eat, a person needs his garments. So the Eitz Chaim writes that in the heavens above in Gan Eden, there's also the component, the phenomenon of garments, in order the neshama to appreciate Gan Eden, because Gan Eden is a revelation of godliness. There's an overwhelming revelation and presence of God. We did say that it's just the ray of Hashem, as opposed to the essence of Hashem, which is precisely found down here in this world, in the Torah, which we learn in the mitzvahs. But there is an open, overt, a strong, overwhelming revelation of godliness which exists in Gan Eden, when the neshama can appreciate. But in order to appreciate it, just like we need to appreciate this world, we need to be dressed in garments. The neshama, in order to appreciate this revelation of godliness which exists in Gan Eden, needs the garments. What is the garments? The garments are the mitzvahs. So the more mitzvahs we do, the bigger wardrobe we have in Gan Eden. And he says, conversely, we need to eat in this world in order to live normally in this world. In Gan Eden, you also need to eat in order to appreciate what Gan Eden stands for, which is, again, to appreciate the godly reality, or the godly revelation which exists in Gan Eden. What is the sustenance in the world to come? That is the Torah where the person learns in this world. The Torah we learn to. So what is the Alter Rebbe bringing this Eitz Chaim over here for? The Rebbe is bringing this Eitz Chaim to show us that Torah and mitzvahs, even though they both have in common that one connects to the essence of Hashem, but when we're dealing with garments and sustenance, he says the garments are the mitzvahs, the sustenance is the Torah, which is exactly a line which we learned up till now, or in this Perek, that the mitzvahs surround the neshama, while the Torah, additional to surrounding the neshama, enters within, similar to the lechem, to the bread, to the sustenance which enters within the neshama. That's why the Eitz Chaim says, it uses this expression that the mitzvahs are the levushim, the garments, while the Torah is the sustenance. Now, interestingly, so this is the end quote of the Eitz Chaim, where he writes not just learning Torah. But if you see the Eitz Chaim adds one word over here to the Torah which you learned, lishma. Lishma means for the sake of Torah. This is like the expression of Torah lishma we find across the board. Across the board means, say, in even in our brachas we say lishma, to learn Torah for the sake of Torah. And the Gemara speaks about it, and Midrashim, so learning Torah lishma, and there's idea in Torah lishma in contrast to shalom lishma. No, it's not for the sake of God. What means not for the sake of someone wants to learn Torah in order that everybody should talk about him. That's what if you later Alter Rebbe is going to show us that it's even worse than learning Torah, not lishma. Not lishma means you just learn Torah because you're learning Torah. So here you're learning with a complete ulterior motive, which is antithetical to the kedusha, to the sanctity of Hashem. I'm learning Torah. I'm utilizing God's Torah in order people should talk about me. It's a shame to the Torah, but there's different levels in Shalom Lishma, learning something not for the sake of it. Unfortunately, it's something, you say someone learns Torah and you say he learned Torah Lishma for the sake of Torah. It's a total different level a person reaches. Now, what if a person cannot learn Torah lishma? He always feels that there's an ulterior motive. Should he just close the book and say, look, I'm not doing this the right way anyway, so I might as well stop and not learn Torah? No, the Gemara says no. That a person should always learn Torah because that's a mitzvah. And eventually, he says, even if he's learning it not for the sake of God, learn it a lot, even not for the sake of God. Eventually, you will get to the level of learning it for the sake of God. Mitoch shalol lishma balishma. Through learning Torah, shalol lishma is not for the divine sake of the Torah. Eventually you'll get there. So on the ground, if one wants to fulfill this mitzvah and he's having problems, or whatever he learns Torah is for ulterior motive, the Torah dictates and tells him, you continue learning. Eventually you'll reach the level of lishma. But what is this lishma? What is this lishma? For the sake of Torah, for the sake... And even lishma could be, misunderstood. Famous expression there's a joke between and it was all along, hundreds, maybe thousands of years, that someone always wants to impress his expression. They want to impress his mother-in-law. The Koli Galmani gets married. He wants to impress his mother-in-law, so they used to say, I don't know if he used to say just as a joke. They used to say lishma. Lishma means for the sake of Shma. Also for the sake it's lishma and lishma. Lishma is the feminine wording, but lishma literally means for the sake of Torah. But lishma, they said he wants to impress his mother-in-law. So that, there's so many. The word lishma is especially when one serves Hashem, to get to the core of a genuine service. It's not so easy. So firstly, it's important to know what is lishma. What means lishma for the sake of Torah? The Rebbe says, don't look for levels, and don't look for, when you say the sake of Torah, for the sake of God. Just that knowledge that within the Torah there is God's essence, and when I'm going to learn the Torah, I'm going to be connected to the essence of God. And not only that, I'm going to be connected to the essence of God with this unique connection, which doesn't even exist by mitzvahs. That is lishma. You need no more. Just that knowledge that when I open up, if it's a Chumash, if it's a Shulchan Aruch, if it's a Mishnah, any part of Torah, and I know that this is where God's essence is, and I'm going to learn it, I'm going to connect to God. Firstly, I'm going to connect to God similar to all the other mitzvahs. The godly energy would encompass me. But more than that, I will connect to God via the unique connection which exists uniquely in Torah, exclusively in Torah, that I'm sandwiched, means to say the godly energy is surrounding me and I'm surrounding it. Means to say that unique union which exists with the essence of God by learning this Torah, that is means that Torah Lishma. That is learning Torah Lishma.
Are you always supposed to have that intention when you learn it? You should always go into it like...
You know what? When you say always have to have the intention, how long does it take? What kind of concentration does one need really to have that intention?
Well, it's probably the intention you're supposed to have. But
right, but when you say always, is it something which is far-fetched?
Oh, no, you're supposed to be aware of it. You're supposed to open it up and be like, I'm now connecting to the deep essence of God.
So, well.
You should be, probably.
You should. That's it. Now, that is the quintessential approach to learning Torah. Now, it does say that, and again, that it's not time-consuming. And not only it could be appreciative. In other words, when we learn Torah, we can appreciate the learning Torah so much more, and maybe even with excitement, if you will, that we're learning and we're connecting to God in the most unique possible way, even greater than all the neshamas are connecting in Gan Eden, as an example. As we mentioned, again, the first part of the chapter says in Gan Eden is just the ray of God, not the essence, which is based on the Mishnah, which says, the Gemara says, Nene miziv hashchina. Ziv means, literally in Hebrew, Ziv means the ray of the divine presence.
What is, you keep saying ray and essence, the ray and the, what was it?
The Shechina is the divine presence. Right. Ziv means the ray. Literally, you have the sun, the ball of the sun, the core, the ma'or, which is the illuminator, as a strong luminescent, right? The sun. Then you look, you see the ray was coming with the sun, which you appreciate over here. I mean, it's not the sun itself, it's the ray of the sun, right? Which is kind of second generation. What warms when you say, oh, I opened my back door and the sun was right there? It wasn't the sun. The sun is up there somewhere, right? Millions of miles away. It's the ray which we appreciate, which is by definition the second generation. Same thing, it says the Shekhinah is divine presence. And then there's the Ziv HaShechina, which is the ray of the divine presence. The Neshamas in Gan Eden, in the heavens above, or even the Malachim, they appreciate the ray of God. The essence of God is in Torah. So, firstly, it's not a big effort. Just to answer your question over here, okay? Just answer your question. It's not an effort, and something we can get used to, and eventually is incorporated into our mind process, our thoughts and an approach to Torah. That learning Torah is because God is in the essence of God is in Torah, and I connect to God by learning Torah. So it's not something every time we open up a sefer, hold on, I started learning without thinking, I got to stop. No, it's the idea that we get used to understanding what Torah is all about. And if you think about it, There's nothing greater than God. Not only God is everything, and everything is God. And this is the essence. This Torah which I'm learning, Hashem invested His essence, which is deeper, infinitely deeper than the ray of God which exists in Gan Eden. Think about it. It could bring even excitement to the nefesh habahamis, even to the animal soul which exists. In other words, even to us as human beings, not only to the soul, the way his soul is ideally divested from body and this bodily or worldly reality. We can appreciate it as human beings. Wow, this is where God is. This is where our Father is. This is where it's all about. This is where it's at, and even greater than mitzvahs. So it's not like it's not every time I open a book, I have to think about it. It's the idea that we get used to this notion that this is what Torah is all about. There's nothing else in Torah. And once we realize that, then our whole appreciation and understanding to Torah is so much different. And that is Torah Lishma. So when the Eitz Chaim writes that this is going to bring us our sustenance in Gan Eden, he adds the words Lishma, that when you learn Torah, not learning Torah because I want to, as an intellectual pursuit, or that people should be calling me this gadol of Torah or something. That's Lei Lishma, maybe even worse than Lei Lishma. In order that Torah should become your sustenance in Gan Eden, it has to be Torah Lishma. And what is Lishma? Lishma, just to connect my soul to God through the perception of Torah, each one according to his understanding. I'll just say the final words, even though we are late, but I'll say the final words just to conclude the chapter. This is the brackets over here. So this is the idea of Lishma. And the Shema, again, the Chaim uses the word sustenance, again, synonymous with what Alter Rebbe writes in this chapter, that it enters within. Sustenance is an inner light. Garments, just so we understand garments, it's something which encompasses and surrounds. Therefore, the Razal tells us that learning Torah weighs and corresponds to all the mitzvahs. They're only garments. But Torah, he mustn't become levush lenefesh hamaskelos. Torah has both its sustenance and a garment to the a soul, which is again intellectualizes via its understanding. The godly energy invests in it, muda, by its learning and profoundly understanding and investing in learning Torah. How much more so when he verbalizes the words of Torah, the oxygen of the speech becomes also an additional layer of an encompassing energy over the neshama, which learns Torah in a way that it verbalizes the words of Torah, like it says in Priyatz Chaim, also a book written, a sefer written by the Reb Chaim Vital, the student of the Arizal. Have a good night.